1, 2. Testing 1, 2, 3. Up higher. Up higher. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Okay, I think we're about ready to begin. The moment you've been waiting for, right? Okay, my name is David Morgan. Welcome to the Hayden Lake Seventh-day Adventist Church. Jody Johnson is our Health Ministries Director. Many of you have gotten to know her a little bit here. We invited Barbara O'Neill to be here and to share with us and to share with our friends in the community. And as I mentioned before, I'm just going to mention it again. There's a restroom here for the ladies, the men's outside the door to the left, and there's additional men and women's restrooms around the stairwell, back in the next wing where we have our classes. And then we are live streaming. So the website is on the screen, haydenlakeadventist.org. We also have a Facebook page and a YouTube, as well as Vimeo. So if you have friends or relatives or neighbors that are interested and can't be here, you can direct them that way. And I've been told that the recording for this evening and future, like tomorrow and following, about an hour or so or this evening should be available on the website if someone's not watching by live stream, but you want to go back and review the material as well, okay? So that's available to you. Yes, so tonight, Barbara O'Neill, she'll begin here in just a few moments, but she will not be available after the end of the lecture, but she will be here at 4 o'clock tomorrow for book signing, pictures, things like that. And then we'll begin at 5 o'clock again. And then at the end of tomorrow evening's presentation, she will be available for question and answer. But she will not be available this evening after the close of the lecture for this tonight. And I mentioned the live stream. And being a pastor, I always like to have prayer. Would you mind if I just pray that God bless our time together? All right. Our loving Father in heaven, I just want to thank you for Barbara being here safely and every one of us. It's dry in here. And so we just thank you for your blessings and ask, Lord, that this will be something where we all can learn something about how you are our creator and how you've created us to the body to heal itself. And so we thank you, Father, in Jesus' holy name. Amen. All right, I think we're ready to go, aren't we?
Truth and beauty and happiness, it's all in the name of Jesus. Health and heaven, peace and rest, it's all in the name of Jesus. Joy and gladness, forgiveness too, for life everlasting and free. All that I long for and all that I need, it's all in the name of Jesus. Jesus, He's here and He will show you the way. Jesus, He's all that you need today. Care and comfort, healing and grace, it's all in the name of Jesus. Welcome, pardon, a hiding place, it's all in the name of Jesus. Warmth and sunshine, friendship true, fulfillment and blessings untold, hope for tomorrow and help for today, it's all in the name of Jesus. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus. He's here and he will show you the way. Jesus, Jesus, he's all that you need today. All in the name of Jesus.
Welcome, everyone. We've got a great crowd, and I hear there's more down below. So hi, ones down below, and I know that I think they can see me on a screen. So thank you so much for coming, and I know that you're here because you're interested in getting the most out of your body. It was probably about 2010 I wrote the book Self-Heal by Design. And Self-Heal by Design is a book that talks about the true role of microorganisms in disease. And it surprises me that the book is still a very popular book. And I think it's a very popular book because of what happened in 2020. You remember? How could we ever forget? Because if we human beings as a whole knew the true role of microorganisms in disease, I don't think 2020 could have happened. Because when you understand the true role of microorganisms in disease, then you realise a virus is nothing to be afraid of. The fact is, microorganisms are everywhere. They're on every surface area, they're in the air that we breathe. There are 10 times more microorganisms in the body than cells, and we've got 100 trillion cells in the body. And there are 10 times more microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract than anywhere else in the body. Does that mean we're more plant than animal? These microorganisms are everywhere. And when the planet, the plant, the body, the environment, in and out of the body are running well, these microorganisms are an integral part of life. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to look at microorganisms. I have used these before, but I'm just getting used to it again, and I actually don't want green. So here we go. I think I need white. And I think I need it here. And let's see if that works. And eraser. Yes, bear with me. Let's see if that worked. Actually, I think I know what to do. Erase. Maybe it's this end. Yes. As my husband says, I'm not as silly as I look. Microorganisms. Microorganisms, as the name implies, are microscopic. That means you can't see them, but they're living things. Micro meaning microscopic, organisms mean they're living things, and they're everywhere. And these microorganisms are an integral part of life on planet Earth, but whenever cell damage happens, these microorganisms have the ability to change roles, just as we change roles. We were very excited when we landed here the day, was it yesterday, I think, or Sunday? We saw snow. Now I'm an Australian. We don't see snow unless we go up to Mount Kosciuszko. You might remember Mount Kosciuszko from school days. It's our highest peak. And I realised I had to dress a little differently than when I was in Florida 2 weeks ago. Just as we change roles according to the environment. So do the microorganisms. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed on my morning walk. And I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed when I was sleeping last night. I'm not dressed now the way I was dressed in Florida. We change roles according to the environment, so do the microorganisms. And whenever cell damage happens, the microorganisms now become the cleanup team. In fact, one microbiologist said to me, we call them the garbage collectors. That's what they do. They're cleaning up the garbage. But have you noticed... Oops, I've got a green there. Oops, we've got another green. It's just making it interesting, isn't it? Have you noticed do you call it a garbage collector? You call garbage trash, don't you? We don't call it trash, but I'm getting to know your lingo. Have you noticed when the garbage collectors come, they don't take your front gate, and they don't take your fence, and they don't take the tree? That's because all they're interested in is taking garbage. And that's what our own garbage collectors do. They just clean up the garbage. So whenever cell damage happens, the microorganisms, remember they're everywhere through our body, they change roles. They become the garbage collectors, and their name is bacteria. That's what bacteria is, and that's what it does. You know what that means? The more rubbish, the more waste, the more trash, the more bacteria. It's actually that simple. Now, as the environment changes, so do the microorganisms. They now become the exterminators. And the exterminators are part of cleaning up the rubbish. And the exterminator's name is yeast, and Candida is another yeast, fungus is another name, and there's another name that became very famous in 2020. It's called virus. Did you know that if you have a look at the basic functions of yeast, fungus, it's exactly the same as virus. It needs a host. Do you know what that means? It can't live on that bench there. So you know what that means? Before I touch it, I don't have to put hand sanitizer all over it, because it needs a host. As the environment changes, so do they. They now become the undertakers. And undertakers take away dead things. And the name of the undertakers is mould. And it's not long after the mould stage that the matter is brought back to dust. Now, what I have drawn for you here is the cycle of life. And the cycle of life is the cycle that takes matter, it breaks it down through these stages, and it brings the matter back to dust. And isn't that why we have compost bins? I have 3 compost bins in my garden at home. One I'm adding to, one is sitting, and one I'm taking from. So the one I'm adding to, I'm putting scraps from the kitchen, I'm putting weeds from the garden, and maybe if we've got chooks, or you call it chickens. Is that right? We call the babies chickens and the adults chooks. I'll say chickens, then you know what I mean. So if we got chickens, you might scrape the chook yard, or you call it a chicken yard, and put that on, and the farmer down the road, you might put some of the manure from his cows into the compost bin, and you layer it. And the one that's sitting, I'm waiting for these microorganisms to bring matter back to dust. And then the third compost bin, I know it's ready to put in my garden because tomato plants are coming up, pumpkin plants are coming up. And I've got a photograph of me in my compost bin, not those other two, they can get a bit smelly, but the one I'm taking from, I'm squatting down and I've got a handful of it. Smells like earth. It's ready to go into my garden. And when I put it into my garden, what am I putting into my garden? I'm putting microorganisms. You see, a basic law of science states nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. It's called the cycle of life or the carbon cycle. And the basic law of science states nothing's created and nothing's destroyed. It just changes form. This is imperative. Understanding the cycle of life or the carbon cycle, it's imperative to understand that so that we know the true role of these microorganisms in disease. And something that's rarely asked is this little 3-letter word, why? So if the bacteria is ever out of control, if the yeast, fungus, virus are out of control, the mould, what should we be asking? Why? Why? And Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. And the Bible says in Proverbs 26 verse 2, the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, no curse, no problem, no disease, nothing of any concern happens without a cause. There's always a cause. And one of my first health books was The Ministry of Healing. And I know they have some available out there. And there's a chapter called The Physician, the Educator. Did you hear that? Did you know that's what physician means? Educator. And unfortunately today, because of Medicare in Australia, I think Obamacare here, doctors are only allowed to spend 15 minutes per person. And how much are they going to learn in 15 minutes? And that's why I believe that we should be our own doctors. And part of being your own doctor is documenting your case, because we are what we are today because of all that, because of everything that's happened in our past. And I remember I was at a retreat in London a few years ago, and a lady came to me every day. She'd come and she said, "Barbara, I've just remembered something else." She said, "When I was 3, I fell off the tractor." That's another piece. That's another piece in the equation. And that's why it's good to go, and if Mum and Dad are still alive, "Mum, what was my birth like? What did you feed me? Did I get the shot? Did I react? And by the way, if there's a fever or if the child is crying for hours, that's a reaction." And that, of course, we can't change what happened in the past, but it explains. It explains so much as to why these things are so. Rudyard Kipling, famous poet, he wrote a whole poem on this, and I'll just give you the first stanza. He said, "I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, why, when, where, how, and who." Do you have your 6 trusty serving men? Do you take them everywhere you go? And if you're at a health professional and you're asking a lot of questions, and I hope you don't go in unless you've got a whole page of them, because you're employing them to do you a service, and if they get annoyed at your questions, arise, politely excuse yourself, and leave and don't pay the bill. Have you ever been to a doctor that will not listen to you? That's very frustrating. Don't be that doctor. If the body says stop, what should you do? We're not very good at that, are we? Because if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming. And if it starts screaming, it's doing damage. So please, that's an important part of being your own doctor, is investigating why these things are so and listening. So let's go back to the compost bins, which explains so much in the cycle of life. And I'm going to show you what I do with my... that's the right colour, isn't it? This is a plant from my garden. And underneath the ground there are roots. and I dig up my compost and I put it into my garden. In fact, before I put another crop in, I always feed the soil, because the previous crop took a lot of nutrients out of the soil, and you should not put another crop in there until you've fed the soil. And when I put the compost into the soil, what am I putting into the soil? I'm putting microorganisms. Now these microorganisms, they are now going to play another role. They now are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the soil. Aren't you glad we don't have to eat dirt to get minerals? We couldn't get them anyway. A lady came to me one day and she said, "Barbara, I've got a terrible story for you, and I'm so embarrassed to even tell you." She said, "A little 10-month-old baby ate some dog droppings." Isn't that what they do? I said, "Don't worry about it. It's going to go in one end and out the other. And we're going to look at that process tomorrow. We're going to start up here and end at the other end." And you will discover that the gastrointestinal tract is a hollow tube. And anything that goes in that hollow tube is not part of you or me until it gets broken down to tiny substances, absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. Then it becomes part of you or me. And I said, "Well, it's not something we'd really like our babies to eat, but don't worry about it. It's going in and it'll come out the other end." Same with dirt. And how many little ones get their fingers and eat dirt? And my daughter, one of her babies, used to do that all the time. She'd put her on the grass to play and she'd get her little finger and eat the dirt. And the next day when she changed the nappy, I think you call it a diaper, guess what's in the nappy? Dirt. No, there is another way, and an incredible way for us to get our minerals. And it's these microorganisms. These microorganisms are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals in the soil, and then they are responsible for the absorption of the minerals into the plant. So I'm very glad that I did have a green there, because plant blood is green. Also, these microorganisms play a protective role, protecting the plant from any harmful pathogens that might be in the soil, and these microorganisms are also responsible for the nourishment of the plant. And that plant knows that it needs those microorganisms. So 50% of the fuel that it makes from photosynthesis, it sends back down to the roots to feed the microorganisms. Beautiful illustration of the law of service that is written on every plant in nature. Have you noticed every plant takes with one purpose? To give. To give. Usually to you and me, to give. Are you starting to see that those microorganisms are actually not the enemy? If they're about, we should be asking why. Now I'm going to attempt to move my board onto another one. Oh, how did I do that? Help. Maybe here. I need to move that screen.
Do you want a blank page?
Okay. What happens if I want that one back? We won't worry about, oh yeah, how'd you do that? Now I can go to the next, how can I go to the next one? Great, thanks. Right, we're getting there. I'm going to be really good at this tomorrow night. I'm going to now take you somewhere that you may never have taken these microorganisms before, although this area is an area of great interest. And that is the gastrointestinal tract of human beings. And if you notice, they're very, very similar to the roots of the plant. Now, I've got some very exciting news. It's exciting for me. At 8:30 last night, my 4th great-grandchild was born. Now, when that baby was in her mother's womb, her gut was sterile, no microorganisms. But when that baby was born, that baby was literally showered with the mother's microorganisms. In fact, I was watching a documentary on the gut, on microorganisms, and they were interviewing a gynecologist, and he said, we always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close. He said, to the point, the man was in his 70s, that 50 years ago, if a woman was in labour, we'd always give her an enema. We want to clean that area out. But he said, we now know it's a perfect design. Because when the birth canal stretches open with the baby coming out, that little canal next door also stretches open, and the air coming out of there is laden with the microorganisms from the colon, and the baby goes and swallows, and that's those first gulps start to take those microorganisms into the gut, and a thick turf wall starts. So my little great-granddaughter, Amelia Esther, is now feeding every few hours off her mother's breast, but there's no milk yet. The milk doesn't come in for 3 days. What she's taking in is a thick, yellowy colostrum, and it's incredibly rich. And I think it's Friday night where we're going to be looking at our immune system. And isn't that the one thing that everyone agreed on in 2020, which is about the only thing? And that was, we need to boost our immune system. And you will discover that 70% of our immune system is established by these microorganisms that line the gastrointestinal tract, called our microbiome, our friendly bacteria, our friendly flora. These microorganisms in the gastrointestinal tract, they do a very similar thing to what they do in the soil. They form a thick turf wall. Here are the roots of the plants, and there's the microorganisms in the soil, and these are just like the roots of the plant, and these are the microorganisms forming a thick turf wall. That's why it's important for a woman at all possible not to take antibiotics in pregnancy, because the antibiotics kill off, they kill off the good and the bad. In fact, one writer said taking an antibiotic is like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. What did the atomic bomb do? It killed the good and the bad. These microorganisms lining the gastrointestinal tract, they are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. And as we go on the journey through the gut tomorrow, you will discover that these microorganisms, there we go, that worked. These microorganisms, they are responsible for the final breakdown of foods. Now, yes, you'll discover there's enzymes all through the gastrointestinal tract that are breaking down our food, but these microorganisms, they're releasing something else. They're releasing or affecting the release of our B vitamins. They are also causing the production of melatonin, helps us sleep better at night, also causing the production of glutathione, which has been hailed as the #1 antioxidant. And it's not something you can eat, it's something's released because of our gut flora. Our gut flora is also responsible for the absorption of our minerals out of our gut and into the blood. These microorganisms are also play a protective role, and we'll be looking at that when we look at the immune system. And they also are responsible for the nourishment of the cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. We're constantly being remade. These cells that line the gastrointestinal tract, they're remade every 3 to 5 days. So then the question arises, well, how come someone with irritable bowel, Crohn's disease, colitis, gastritis, why don't they heal in 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? It's a very reasonable question, and we'll be looking at that in detail tomorrow night. Crohn's disease, it's been called an autoimmune disease. I have to tell you, I do not believe in autoimmune diseases, because God did not design this body to eat itself. Something has happened. It's time to put this resident Y up here that should be on every single board. And if someone has been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, I would like to suggest that it's a good idea to reject that diagnosis, because it's an opinion. Did you hear that? It's an opinion. And so if ever you've been diagnosed with that, you say, thank you so much for your advice. I'm going to seriously consider this. And you go home and you do consider it. You see, God said, in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, he said, I've not given you the spirit of fear, but of power. What's power? Isn't knowledge power? Love. Love glues us together, and a sound mind considers the pros and the cons. We should never make a decision because of fear, and I think many people did in 2020. And I know many people now are sorry, because a lot of people thought maybe this is serious, but I think we all know now it wasn't. My husband calls it the great pretend. Well, let's go back to our subject tonight. So as you can see, my aim is to show you that the microorganisms are not the enemy. They're an important part of life on planet Earth. And one of my favourite heroines is Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale, in 1854, she was asked to go to Scutari. So Scutari is the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. The British and the French were fighting the Russians in Crimea. This is the Black Sea. The wounded were put in boats, sailed down to Scutari. And Scutari is the port where the hospital was. The hospital really was just ex-army Turkish barracks that had been hastily put together because of all the wounded. And a war correspondent went to report on the war effort, and he was shocked at what he saw in that hospital. Men were dying like flies. In fact, the death rate in that hospital is 50%. That's greater than on the battlefront. So he went back to London and he wrote headlines, "Did we raise our young men to die like this?" Well, the British government quickly rose up and asked Florence and 35 nurses to go to Scutari to see what she could do. She was shocked. There was raw sewage in the corridors. She met a man who still was in his battle clothes 2 weeks after he'd been admitted. The doctors were not washing their hands between operations. They'd say, well, we're already covered in blood. And the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, you're not coming in here, this is men's business. So they sent her to the kitchen. Well, in the kitchen there were big vats of water with bits of rotten meat in it. That was their food. I think it's a miracle that the death rate wasn't 80% when you look at the conditions. She knew her limitations as a woman in 1854, so she nearly said email, telegrammed the British government and said, we need a sanitary commission to come and assess this. And she also telegrammed her father. She wanted a shipload of clean linen, clean bandages, scrubbing brushes and a cook. Meanwhile, another boatload of wounded arrived, 1,200 wounded men, and the hospital was already full. And so the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, all right, you can come in. And she just got them to start scrubbing and cleaning. The sanitary commission arrived and they discovered that the hospital was built in a swamp. And in the swamp they found a dead horse. In case you don't know, that's a horse. And that's a dog. Dead horse and dead dog in the swamp, and the men in the hospital were drinking the water. So very quickly the sanitary commission assessed it. They got plumbers, they got, started to drain it. They, did all they could. Meanwhile, inside, Florence and her nurses are scrubbing and cleaning, and the clean bandages came, and the cook that started to cooked some decent food, and within 2 months the death rate went from 50% to 2%. Now, we can never forget Florence. Now, the man that made the germ theory famous, Louis Pasteur, was a chemist. And when Florence Nightingale read of his theory, she said, "This is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind." And anyone who believes it is equally unstable. Because germs don't cause disease, they're the result. And all Florence did was she got in there and she started cleaning up the place. She started scrubbing and cleaning. And when she went back to England, 14 months later, there was a big welcoming party there for her because, oh, how they loved her. That was their sons, their grandsons, their nieces, their nephews that were dying in that hospital. And when she saw the welcoming party, there was Queen Victoria, Prince Albert. She changed her name to Mary Smith and went down the back gangplank and went home. And they said to her later, "Why did you do that?" She said, "I'm not a heroine." She said, "All I did was increase hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition." Got that? Hygiene, sanitation, and nutrition. She just turned the tap off. So there was nothing for these microorganisms that I just drew for you that are on the other screen, and I'm actually not quite sure how to get it. But I'm sure your memory serves you well on that. You see, they're not the enemy, and she knew that. How come Florence knew that and the doctors didn't? Well, you might be surprised and you might not be surprised. She read her Bible. And in the little book, The Ministry of Healing, there's a chapter in there called the health regulations that God gave the Israelites. Remember Moses in the desert with millions of people? Do you know there was no sickness because there were strict rules of cleanliness. If someone wanted to go to the bathroom, they had to go outside the camp, dig a hole, and no one was to know they had been there. If someone died in the camp, and the only death the report was from old age, the body had to be carried out, dug a hole, buried, and the people carrying that dead body could not go back in the camp for 3 days. They had to wash their clothes, they had to wash their bodies. So there's strict cleanliness rules, so there was no disease in the camp. That's how come Florence Nightingale knew. Did you know that in the 1850s all the sewage from London went into the Thames and the people living in London drank that water? No wonder the Black Plague happened. See? That's why there's no Black Plague anymore, because it was in the late 1850s they built a sewage system under the streets of London. You might have seen photographs from that time where children would be playing in the gutter, in raw sewage and rats. So I'd like to show you a graph. And you'll see all the childhood illnesses from that time: mumps, measles, rubella, polio, whooping cough, tetanus, diphtheria. And you will find there's a drop in all these diseases. Why? Because of Florence Nightingale. Hygiene, that's first keep the body clean, wash it every day, put clean clothes on every day. Sanitation, keep the house clean, sweep the floor, empty the trash can every day, scrub your bathroom every week. And nutrition. So that's all she did. That's why she said, "I'm not a heroine, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition." And that's why we had a drop in those childhood illnesses, and in some cases 80% wiped out, sometimes 90% wiped out, and that green shows when the childhood shots were introduced. And what are we told? We're told they caused the decrease, but it is not true. Now we've got another graph. Attention deficit syndrome, hyperactivity, and epilepsy, autism. What caused that? The neurotoxins that are in those shots. What I tell you is the truth, and this can be sussed out. Unfortunately, These graphs have been taken out of the medical journals, but there are several books that are showing these graphs. And that's why if someone says to me, should I give my child the shots? I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You need to investigate. Now, the Bible says in Psalm 146, verse 3, put not your trust in princes. Who are the princes? The authorities in the field, authorities in government, authorities in nutrition, authorities in medicine, authorities in any field. It doesn't mean you don't go to them. It doesn't mean you get their advice. But what can you do with that advice? You can take it or leave it. You see, God's government is a government of freedom, and freedom is based on free choice. Amen. I am the master of my destiny. I'm the one that chooses what I do and what I do not do to my body. Don't let anyone take that right away from you. It is your God-given right to say, no, thank you very much. Because it's your God-given right. And that's why I believe we all should be our own doctors. I'm not against doctors. Some of my best friends are doctors. And surgery's come a long way, absolutely. But when I broke my arm, my radius, total break out of alignment, just a little bit over a year ago, walking on the rocks with my grandchildren, walking along, and I didn't realise in this big flat rock there was a bit of a dip, and there had been water and it recently dried. So I put my foot there, whole body went up, slammed down. Very, very painful. Told me there was something seriously wrong, and the lifesaver came running over, and when she looked at the arm she said, you go straight to the hospital, because it was really weird look. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm in hospital waiting to be seen, and I'm so glad God doesn't show you the future. I sat there for 6 hours in the most excruciating pain, waiting to see the orthopaedic surgeon. Why did I sit there? Because the whole system is chocked up with people that have got a sore finger, a sore knee, my blood pressure's gone up, my heart's racing, I feel sick. And the nurse said, have you had anything to drink today? Oh, not much. And I'm sitting there thinking, I can't believe this. I could fix them, 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 I could fix them. Yeah. And you know, I sat there and I thought, they reckon we're an enlightened age. I think we're a dumb age. We don't even know how to look after our bodies. These are simple little things that could easily be fixed. And I am also very thankful for the skill of the orthopaedic surgeon that pulled my radius back into place. And I'm so thankful for the pain-killing medication so I didn't feel him pull it back into place. Absolutely, in a crisis, a drug can be necessary. So we're not talking about that. But we're talking about every little bits and pieces. And I sat there thinking, now I know why I do what I do. To teach people how to look after their own bodies with the simple, natural treatments. Now, before the Australian government saw fit to ban me, because I'll leave it up to you to work out this week whether I'm a threat to public safety, but before the government saw fit to ban me, there used to be several doctors in Australia. They get me to go to their town to give these meetings because they knew that if people knew these simple ways to look after the body, then that would reduce casualty. And the poor doctors and nurses are run off their feet because people don't know how to get a splinter out. They don't know how to fix a sore toe. They don't know how to calm themselves when they've got a... And isn't this the most neglected area of education? And in that little book, The Ministry of Healing, in the chapter, The Physician, the Educator, on the second page it says, the only hope of better things is the education of people in the right principles. And then it says, let the physicians teach the people that restorative power lies not in drugs, but in nature. In nature, there's only one thing that has the ability to heal us, and that is this body. And you will discover this week, as we go through different parts of this body and different ailments, that everything we need, we actually have got. It's inside of us. So there are two basic systems of healing today. One's based on fear. And this system that's based on fear is based on a theory that we evolved. And because we evolved, we cannot heal. And because we cannot heal, then a whole billion-dollar industry was developed to produce drugs. Drugs never heal disease. They just change the form and location. An orthopaedic surgeon said to me, "Barbara, I can set a bone, but I cannot heal a bone." That's true. He can set a bone, but he cannot heal it. And this system was based on deception. What's deception? Not as it seems. Another system is based on faith. And the Bible verse for faith is found in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. If you can see it, it's not faith. I had to have a lot of faith in that 6 weeks that this wrist was bound up. It was the longest 6 weeks of my life. But have you noticed it healed? It healed. What an incredible body we have. That's based on faith. And it's based on the fact that we were created in the image of God and we were created with an inbuilt ability to heal. And if you get a cut, it heals, doesn't it? Unless you keep pulling it open. But it'll heal. And you know, there's been a death and no one attended the funeral because no one knew he died. It was the death of common sense. There's a bit of common sense there. It's like I was talking to this guy. He said, "Oh, there was sun today, so I ran out. And I got so burned." I said, "Where's your common sense, mate? If you haven't had sun for a while and you lie there for an hour, you're going to be burnt." Now, that's not rocket science, is it? Part of being your own doctor is some common sense. We were created to heal, but sometimes we might need a bit of help. And that's where God gave us herbs. And in Psalm 104, verse 14, the Bible says, God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse because the herbs come in to serve you. Where do you want me? What would you like me to do? Medicine calls it synergism, working with the needs of the body. You see, if the human body was designed to heal itself, and the crescendo on Friday night will be the immune system where you will see we have everything we need to heal. If the human body was designed to heal itself, doesn't it make the most sense that to bring about healing in the body is you work with that? You work with that process? So herbs come into your body to serve you. And what I tell you here is the truth. Drugs are like robots. Get out of my way, I've got a job to do whether you need it or not. And that's why I say to people who are on medication for the high blood pressure, for blood thinning, I say, when you change your diet, when you start implementing these herbs, you got to be careful. Your blood might get too thin, not because of the cayenne pepper, because you're still on the blood thinning medication. And that's why one guy came to us and his doctor took him off everything because his blood pressure had gone down, and if he didn't take him off the drugs, he'd start fainting everywhere. And his blood thinning had come back to normal, and if he didn't stop the blood thinning medication, he'd start bleeding everywhere. And can you see what I'm saying? Because the drugs have no intelligence at all. They're just robots. Get out of my way. I've got a job to do, whether you need it or not, but not the herbs. The herbs work with the needs of the body. And so what they do when they plaster your hand now, they do a two-part plaster because of the swelling. And that was great because I could just cut one off. I knew I had to immobilise it, that's common sense for it to heal. But I was able to put comfrey poultices on. And comfrey is a herb that has a growth stimulant. It stimulates rapid healing. In fact, its nickname is knit bone. So every day for a few hours I would put that on. I was talking to a lady recently and she said to her husband, remember the comfrey we had in the garden? It just took over? That's because it's got a growth stimulant. So don't put it in your veggie garden or you'll lose your veggie garden. It'll just take over. Put it somewhere where it doesn't matter if it takes over. Now at the moment, because of the snow and the cold, the leaves are gone, but all the healing properties are in the root. So if you need it in the winter, you dig up the root and grate it. Anyway, it was summer, so I put because we're still in summer in Australia. This is the last month of summer for us. So I put the comfrey on every day, and after 4 weeks, I went back to have an x-ray. Now, when the orthopaedic surgeon pulled it into place and plastered it, they x-rayed it. And he came to me, he said, look, it's pretty good. That was enough for me. I thought, pretty good's enough for me. That comfrey will take it the rest of the way, whatever pretty good meant. I think it meant that it was in line enough, but not perfect. So at 4 weeks, they wanted to x-ray it again just to check if it was all going right. And they were just so puzzled that this 70-year-old woman's bone was almost perfectly healed. At 4 weeks, now it takes 6 weeks to heal a bone, but this, and I know that was healed because I drink water, I eat nourishing food, I eat lots of minerals, I exercise every day, etc., etc. Anyway, so they wanted to replaster it just to be sure. And the male nurse was plastering and he said, do you have osteoporosis? I said, no. He said, have you had a test? I said, no. And then I realised that sounds a bit strange, especially because of my age, and he threw his head back and he laughed. He'd never heard anything like it. How do I know I don't have osteoporosis? Well, when my body flew up in the air and slammed down on the rock with this hand underneath me, more than that hand would have broken. In fact, they kept saying to me, is your leg all right? Your hip all right? Is it? Yeah, fine. It's just, there might have been something else, but I could feel nothing else but this hand. And what was interesting is once it was pulled into place, I did not need any more painkillers. You see, that was telling me it needed more than a comfrey poultice at that stage. It was incredibly painful. But my husband went to the nurse when I'm sitting there in the most terrible pain after 5 hours and said, my wife, she's been sitting here for 5 hours, look at her arm. And you know what they said? She's on the fast track. I'd hate to be on the slow track. Do you know, that's something to consider too, is little bits and pieces that you could deal with at home instead of sitting in that emergency waiting room. I don't know, they must have had people dying out the back to put me there. But these two methods of healing show us also very clearly, eraser. There it is. They show us very clearly the role that the body plays in healing. And from what I've already shown you, that if there is any bacteria or yeast or anything like that, we have to ask why. And one of the drugs that people are given if there is what's called an infection is an antibiotic. So I'd like to show you what an antibiotic is, but first of all, I want to have a look at that word. What does the word mean? Against? What's biotic? Life. Anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the potential to kill a large. And we're the large. What is an antibiotic? 1929, Alexander Fleming is growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and all the bacteria is dead. And he knew Newton's third law of motion. Why? So he began to look around. Nothing in the laboratory could have done it. And so he started to look outside. There was an open window, there was sun's rays coming in, and there was a heavy dust, and he watched it, and it just settled on his flasks. So he looked up, and he saw on the next story there was an open window with a plate of fruit, and in the plate of fruit was a mouldy orange. Do you remember the story from school? And he called that mould penicillium. And he called the mould waste penicillic acid. And that mould waste, the mould waste is actually more toxic than the mould. And the mould waste, called penicillic acid, is the penicillin that we know today. And granted, penicillin has saved the lives of probably millions now. But we've got another problem now. Even the World Health Organization have stated in every doctor's surgery there's a plaque. The biggest concern today is the overuse of antibiotics. And I'm actually thankful for antibiotics because that's what opened my eyes. I was trained as a nurse. In fact, as a child, what are we taught? Get sick, go to doctor, give a tablet or a syrup, get better. I didn't realise that if I'd taken nothing, I would have got better. And then as a nurse, I'm taught the same thing. So when my first child got an earache, at 16 months, went straight to the doctor, especially with everyone saying, don't play with the ears, she'll go deaf. So why did I go to the doctor? Out of fear. And I didn't know what else to do. Took the antibiotic, within 24 hours it's eased. Finished the antibiotic, earache comes back. I'm in the doctor 6 weeks later because this has just happened 4 times in a row, and he's writing the 5th course of antibiotics. I am so frustrated. I didn't want to hurt my child, but I didn't want to give them any more drugs, because what's the definition of insanity? To keep doing the same thing and expect a different result? I said, well, my daughter will be on this for the rest of her life. He was challenged by my questions, sent me to an ear, throat, nose and throat specialist, looked in her mouth, looked in her ears, said, the child's teething. Give her these drops to keep the tubes clear. That opened my eyes. So when next child gets an earache 2 years later, I don't go to the doctor. I don't tell anyone because you get pressure, but you've got to do something. So I went to the old lady next door. I'm 25, she's 85. I said, what did your mother do when you were a little girl with an earache? She said, Mum would steam up an onion on the stove. Steamed up an onion on the stove. James slept 2 hours, never had another earache. I was like a woman possessed. There's something else. There's something else. And we are not taught that there is something else. Well, I wasn't. This was in 1978. I didn't know of anything else. That lady's long and gone, the lady that told me about the young impulse. I'm the old lady now. I'm not quite 80 yet. But I'm thankful for that feeling, because till the day I die and have breath, I will teach alternatives, because I know what it feels like to have a sick child not want the drugs because all they do is mask. They don't heal. It's only the body that heals. And remember the herbs, God gave herbs for the service of man. Now what dissipates fear is knowledge. And we can only make decisions on the amount of information we've got. And I agree that the internet has opened the field to information, but also confusion. And that's why I use the Bible and books like The Ministry of Healing and Jethro Kloss's Back to Eden, where he's got about the herbs, and then you can try that. And I know at times I went to the princes, remember, put not your trust in princes? I won't go to the authorities. I'd get an assessment. I'd take the script home. I had it there, but I'd try the young impultus. or I'd try the chopped onion on the feet, or I'd try the simple natural remedies. And I can tell you now that no more did a child of mine have an antibiotic. So I raised 6 children. I married Michael 27 years ago. He had 2, I had 6, now we had 8. We now have 25 grandchildren, and yes, now 4 great, and none of them have had drugs. And something else that might interest you, they're all still alive. Because we live in a body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. And it will heal itself when you give it the right conditions. The problem is many people don't know what those conditions are. And my latest book, Sustain Me, I aimed it to be a handbook on natural remedies. So that if something goes wrong in the home, you can go to the book. What do you do for this? What do you do for that? And it's a herb. And if the herb doesn't work, guess what? You've lost nothing. And sometimes you may need to do it a few times. It's like one of our workers, she got an earache. She had to wear an onion poultice on there. Twice a day she did it for 7 days. How many people after 5 days would say, this isn't working, go and get the antibiotic? But I think antibiotics should be kept for life-saving. For life-saving. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes when it is so advanced, that may be necessary. But when you know the natural treatments, the old saying, nip it in the bud. As soon as there's an issue, then you start with the simple poultices, and that's what I did with all the children. Yes?
If there is one book to buy, which one would you suggest?
So if there's one book to buy, which one would you suggest? Well, the Self-Heal by Design talks about the true cause of disease, where I explore the true role of microorganisms in disease. And that is paramount in understanding how these microbes work. And it also shows you can't blame the virus. Whereas Sustain Me, I start at the head and I go through the eyes, then we look at the ears, then we look at the teeth and have a whole chapter on teeth and the respiratory, and so I cover bones, I go through pancreas, so you see they do slightly different things. But let me show you a little bit more about what's happening with this antibiotic. When you take an antibiotic, what are you putting into your body? You're putting into your body a mould waste. And I used to say, to date, they have documented 5 million different moulds, yeasts and funguses. And every yeast and fungus and every mould waste has a different effect on a different body part. And my husband, who's my biggest critiques, if I pass Michael, I'll pass anyone. He said, I don't believe 5 million. I said, well, check it out. And he came back, he said, 25 million. So there's a lot. And a lot of people don't realise how dangerous mould is. And I think especially in these climates where you've got basements and you've got several months where probably all the windows and everything are closed. Yes, you've got air conditioning and heating, but you have to continually check that. In the old days, they'd have fires. You know what those fires do? They dry the place out. So what can you do when there is a mould presence in the body? First of all, you have to check out why. So I think I'm just going to do something. There we are. No, I don't want that. So what can you do to eliminate yeast or fungus from the body? And what are the most common signs? I think most people are familiar with something like thrush. And how many people have taken an antibiotic and then they get thrush? Do you know the body can cope with 1 or 2 courses of antibiotics in a lifetime? Unfortunately, there are some people that take several courses every year. And there's usually no need. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter on water therapy, showing that simple water treatments you can do. I also have a chapter on poultices, showing the different poultices that can be used. It's like my son James. He's working out and he overdid it and his arm swelled, and he knew what Mum used to do, put a grated potato poultice on it, wrap it up, and the swelling came down. But the elbow swelling didn't go down. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, bursitis. What's bursitis? You know, itis just means inflammation, and bursa is the fluid around the elbow. And he said, I'll give you a course of antibiotics. Now, I also know that not every doctor would prescribe antibiotics for bursitis. It's just inflammation of the bursa. James stood up. He was, I think, 30 at the time. He said, I've never taken an antibiotic in my life, and I'm not about to start. And he left. Do you think that doctor has heard that? Do you know, it is up to us to prove that we can do it. And then he rang Mum. I said, elbow, do grated ginger. Ginger is for joint. And he rang up the next day and said, thanks, Mum, it's gone down. So there are simple little things that you can do. But the problem is today that I find a lot of people are suffering from yeast or fungus in their body. So yes, it can be jock itch, anal itch, it can be tinea, athlete's foot between the toes, but there are a whole lot of other areas they're finding problems that can be caused by fungus. How does it come into your body? It can be inhaled. So be very careful. That one of the worst things you can do to clean mould in the bathroom is bleach. You put bleach and mould together, you create one of the most toxic combinations. So what can you do? There is a time for a mask. I don't know many. I don't know many times, but this is a time. You put the mask on and you fill a spray bottle with just white vinegar and you spray it. You spray it if there's any mould and quickly leave. And in only 10 minutes it will be killed. Then you go in and you can wipe it up. But then you've got to ring up the plumber or the painter or the builder or whoever to find out why the mould is there, because there should not be mould in the house. If the house is high and dry and you've got fans on, there should not be mould there. So it can be inhaled. It also can be ingested. So never eat anything that has any trace of mould on it. And also it can be ingested if it's taken as an antibiotic. And it can also come in through the skin. So please don't touch anything that has mould on it, because your skin can start to absorb it. And it also can be transmitted sexually. You'll find most sexually transmitted disease have a fungus base. It's called myco. If you go to the medical dictionary and look up myco, you'll find about 4 pages of diseases that begin with myco. And then the $1 million question is, how do you get it out of the body? Number 1, starve. What's its favourite food? Sugars, yes. So in my book, Self-Heal by Design, I've got the antifungal stage 1 diet. So it's just getting the fruits right down, definitely stopping all refined sugars, definitely even stopping concentrated sugars. It's not forever, it's just until you conquer it. My husband, when we married, he was 40, and he had terrible tinea. And I'd wake at night with him just scratching, and he had it also in some other parts. And then I heard his history, because it's good to know the history. When he was, I think, about 25, he had to have his wisdom teeth out, and he decided to do it on the cheap and let the students do it. Put him under general anaesthetic, and they were wiring his jaw open, and they broke his jaw. Yeah, pay the extra money, get it done properly. When he woke up, his face was like this. Anyway, long story short, he had to go on some very strong antibiotics, which I do think probably saved his life. But now he had these yeast and fungal problems. And so what I did, I put him on a very strict diet. I used to watch if he had a whole bunch of grapes, wow, his toes had flared. So we got rid of all the really sweet things. And he chose to just stop fruit. So what he'd have for breakfast, I'd cook him a little bowl of vegetables. He'd have avocado on a sourdough toast with lentils on top, or he might have scrambled tofu on top, some nuts and seeds. So he ate like that, and he said at first he thought his throat was cut, but after a while he started to enjoy it, especially with the symptoms easing, and I gave him herbs. There's the kill. And there are herbs that will kill fungus and will not kill you. Garlic's a good one. In my book I list a few. Olive leaf extract's a good one. Also grapefruit seed extract. If you ever bitten onto a seed in the grapefruit, you'll think grapefruit's sweet when you bite that seed. It's strong volatile oils. Back to starve, you also got to be careful there's no exposure to any more mould. And dietary-wise, stop all the yeasts and all the sugars. Kill, we did herbs with him. And also bring back the balance. Bring back the balance in the gastrointestinal tract with probiotics. Probiotics means for life. And probiotics is restoring the balance in the gastrointestinal tract. Because what the antibiotics had done to him, that had caused a massive imbalance in his gut. Another great thing you can do, and we'll talk about this a bit more tomorrow night when we go through the gut, is increasing cultured foods like yogurts. You can get some very nice coconut yogurts. I've even seen a cashew yogurt or a almond yogurt. Kefar's another good one. Sauerkraut's another nice one. But if someone's been on antibiotics, initially they will need to take a probiotic supplement, and that's like a little powder that can be taken 3/4 of an hour before breakfast. So it's bringing back the balance. So that's a simple formula to restore balance back into the body. Our body runs according to precision balance. And what those antibiotics do is they disrupt. Remember, this is the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, and this is the gut flora that lines the gut. When an antibiotic comes in, that gut flora, it starts to break down. And what you've now lost is you've lost the ability to break the food down properly, release those nutrients from the food, the proper absorption. You've also lost your protection and nourishment, so it's vital that the balance be once again restored. In our gut was millions of different microorganisms, and one of them is Candida albicans, and there are dozens of different species of Candida albicans, and they require Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium in there to keep them in their right balance. But what antibiotics do is they kill off the Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. I am speaking English. And what those probiotics do, they replace that, they restore it, they bring it back. And after 6 weeks, on the no fruit, my husband said, do I have to go back to fruit? And so it is now 12 years later, and when I'm home, I cook him veggies every morning because that just sits so very well with him. And I hear him say to people, I never thought I'd be free of this terrible toes. You know, he'd just be scratching, he'd be grinding his toes against the floor. He just thought that's something he had to do. Do you know, he did go to the doctor at first, and the doctor gave him a cortisone cream, like a cortisone cream to put on it. And whenever he put it on, it'd go away, and the palms of his hands would go bright red. So he'd stop, and the hands would go down, but then itch would come back in about a week. But every time he did it, the hands would go bright red. So he went to the doctor after experimenting for a month. He said, look, whenever I put that cortisone cream on, it goes, but my hands go bright red. And the doctor said, no, it's not that. It's got nothing to do with it. That's why you're the doctor. Because only you know how you feel, only you know what you've been through. And that's why you're the best one to know. And the best health professional will listen to you and listen to what you've got to say, because you're the one that lives in the body. That's why, again, it rests with us to choose what we do and what we do not do to the body. And so Michael says now, he says the best thing that ever happened to him was going on that strict diet. Does he eat fruit? Yeah, he does eat fruit. But it's not a huge part of his diet now. And what I find, and I see this many, many times, that people change the diet, change the lifestyle, and we'll be looking at that in more detail as we go through, especially on other lectures, that the body starts to work better. And then when it starts working better, you're now getting quality of life. But what I find is it's a management program, and if you can manage your situation, you're doing well. And everyone I know is managing something. And one day, the Bible says, Jesus will come in the clouds of glory and we'll all be cured. But until then, we manage. And so just before we have a break, I'm going to tell you a funny story about my husband. See, Michael and I run up and down hills every morning. And in 2020, it was illegal to hold a protest, so Michael held one every 2 weeks. Isn't that time for us to stand when we're told that? Any government that comes within a mandate, that's not from God, because God gives free choice. And so there are about 500 people and about 300 police, and they came up to Michael and said, "Sir, if you stand to speak, we will arrest you." He said, "That'll be interesting." And he stood up and he began to speak. They said, "Excuse me, sir, you can't speak." Michael said, "I haven't finished yet." And he continued to talk. And they grabbed him. And they're walking away with him, and they weren't holding him very hard. I wasn't there, but he told me the story later. He said, "I thought I'd have a bit of fun," and he ran. And they couldn't catch him. Now, Michael has white hair. Both his parents were white at 50. And he looks like an elderly gentleman, but he's quite slim, but he's very fit, because we run up and down hills. They could not catch him. And so he ran in and out all around the crowds, and the crowds are whistling and cheering. And they're taking a photo, they're filming it. And he thought, maybe after 5 minutes, I better let them catch me. So they jumped on him. Anyway, they decided not to arrest him, just to fine him. So he's standing at the desk and the policeman's there to take his particulars, and this big guy comes up, built like this, tattoos all over him, big beard. He said, "Are they hurting you, mate?" And he said, "I'm fine." And he said to the policeman, "You heard him, you answer to us." And he looked over there, and there was a whole team of bikies. What do we call them? God's angels. And when he said that to the policeman went... That night, it was on the nightly news. These police running after this grey-haired gentleman, and they couldn't catch him. So 2 weeks later, when Michael held his next protest, there were hardly any police, and they just stood back. Do you know, it's time to make a stand, and that's why it's important for us to keep fit, because we never know whether we'll be in a situation like that. We're going to have a break now, and we're going to have a break of 15 minutes, I believe, yes. And when we come back, we're going to have a look at a word that strikes fear into many hearts today, It's cancer. We're going to look at the truth on cancer.
Barbara, just to make an announcement for just a moment, if you need to use the restroom, again, there's a ladies' restroom here in this room, and the men's are back there on the left. There's several restrooms in the back. There are water fountains around the stairwell, and there's small cups, so if you're thirsty, you're welcome to get a cup of water. And can I have your attention for just a moment? This is quite important. Just a moment, friends. There are a lot of websites and on Facebook and social media that pretend to be Barbara O'Neill. I found a few just by accident, and they're advertising all kinds of products that Barbara O'Neill is not promoting. So her official website is officialbarbarao'neill.com. We're hoping to have it on the screen here in just a moment, but you'll need to check out her website for products she might be promoting. Just realize that not every product that's out there is not being promoted by her. What's happening is people are using AI, and they're taking her voice and videos that she is online, and they're trying to sell their product from a variety of products out there that she doesn't promote. So just realize that it'd be best if you talk to her personally if you have that opportunity, but go to officialbarbarao'neill.com. I just want to mention to you also, when the conclusion of the meeting this evening around 8 o'clock, we will have ushers ushering you out. We just want to make sure everybody's safe, so if we all get up at the same time, it could get kind of chaotic. We're going to open the doors here to my right. People will be able to leave here. Be careful. It's dark outside. It's kind of wet and muddy as well. And be careful when you start to pull out. There's quite a few people. There's people downstairs that's full as well. There's a lot of people at 8 o'clock or so who are going to be leaving. So just be aware of your surroundings. We'll have ushers ushering you out so it's orderly and no one gets hurt. Is fair enough? Okay, and then there will be books. She mentioned this book. We have it available for you, so pick up a copy before you leave. It's The Ministry of Healing. And we will have some young people at the end. It's not required at all. From time to time, people ask me in events that we have, is there any way we can donate to help with expenses? And again, it's not obligated at all. This is a free seminar, but there will be people standing there, young people. If you want to make a donation, you're welcome to. Okay? So if you need to use the restroom, there's water fountains. Please do so. She'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes.
good. Attention, everyone. Can I have your attention for a moment, please? Ladies and gentlemen, just a moment. Barbara O'Neill is going to start here. So if you want to go ahead and get seated, get comfortable, we're going to start here in just a few moments. Thank you. If you want to come on in and have a seat, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's that time again. If you would be so kind as to give me your attention. First things first, how's the temperature inside? Is it a little warm or is it good? You're cold? Man, I'm warm. Okay, we'll try to fix that. We can close a few windows. But I would like to invite you to go ahead and find a seat, and Barbara would like to get started again. We do have the book that she mentioned earlier this evening. It's available at the table. We do have limited copies, so you want to make sure at least you get one copy for your family. And I think, Barbara, if you're ready, we'll have you come forward. Let's give our attention to Barbara for the second part of tonight.
Thank you and welcome back. The subject of cancer, doesn't that strike fear in many people's hearts? And there is no easy answer. And you will find this as I speak tonight, and you'll also find it as we go through looking at many different ailments in the body, that it can be different things in different people, and it can be different causes in different people. But even with something this serious, the body still has the ability to heal. And if people come to our retreat that do have cancer, this is what we say to them. We say, we've seen 3 outcomes. We've seen people heal, and that's good news. Number 2, we've seen 6 months go to 6 years, and that's good news. And the third one is sometimes we've seen the last days made more comfortable. Sometimes it is just so advanced. And we've had a few guests that have died within a few months of coming to our retreat. They were at very advanced stages, and their relatives ring us and say, thank you so much. Thank you so much. They died with dignity. The last days were made more comfortable. We had a lady attend our program. She said, I don't have a long time to live. She was only 45. And she said, I am on chemotherapy as palliative care. I said, what's palliative care? Isn't that making the last days more comfortable? I said, is it doing that for you? And she just looked at me quite shocked. She hadn't thought of that. I said, do you have diarrhea? She said, yes. I said, is your hair still falling out? She said, yes. Do you have nausea? She said, yes. Well, I said, I can't tell you what to do, but I'd like to suggest that it's not giving you very good palliative care. And I said to her, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I would do. And I don't usually have to go on after that. And so she stopped. And within 48 hours, she had no more nausea. And the diarrhea had certainly calmed down. And we see so many people that come and say, If only I'd known this. I did not know. And especially in the area of endocrine cancers. So that would be breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer. And with a man, men can have breast cancer, obviously not as much as women, but prostate cancer, that is unfortunately becoming a very common one. And in those areas, there's definitely a hormonal imbalance. And we're going to be looking at this, I think, on Thursday night. We're going to be looking at hormones. And what you'll find is that progesterone is often called mother hormone because progesterone is the precursor for the female hormone. So we'll call this the daughter, which is estrogen, and there are a few estrogens. And progesterone, being the mother, is mother of the male hormone, the son, which is testosterone. And when these hormones get out of balance, that can contribute to these cancers. You see, estrogen's role is that of a cell proliferator. That means causes massive cell growth. And the Cancer Foundation in Australia have stated that estrogen is a known human carcinogen. So that's been defined by the Cancer Foundation. So why would estrogen be out of balance? Mostly because of the contraceptive pill. It was introduced to women in 1957. 1960s was called the sexual revolution. Women want to be able to have sex without having a baby. But what they don't realise, and what many women still don't realise, is the devastating effect that it has on women to cause this imbalance. You see, the synthetic hormones cause an imbalance, and that imbalance is the rise of estrogen and the dropping of mother hormone. And progesterone, as the mother hormone, plays a protective role on testosterone, meaning it's keeping testosterone in the place it should be, because when testosterone goes too high, it converts to another type of testosterone that causes inflammation of the prostate gland. So when you've got this rise in estrogen with its cell proliferator action, then you've got growths in the breast contributing to breast cancer. You've got growths in the ovaries. You've got growths in the cervix and all of those areas. And so with hormonal cancers, it's of the utmost importance to balance back the hormones. And there's a herb. It's called the wild yam. And the wild yam is grown extensively by the pharmaceutical company, because the pharmaceutical company extract a plant chemical called diosgenin, and diosgenin in a laboratory can be converted to progesterone. But the pharmaceutical company cannot patent progesterone because it can't patent anything natural. So it adds a few more atoms in other areas and comes up with a synthetic estrogen, adds a few more atoms in another area and comes up with a synthetic progesterone. It's called progestin or progestone, and it's these synthetic hormones that are in the pill. And when they're fed into the biochemical pathway that our body uses to make hormones, causes a disruption. And that's what prevents a woman falling pregnant, this disruption. But the problem is these synthetic hormones are causing a rise in estrogen. And the progesterone does not help, and it's progestin. It competes with our progesterone. Our body runs according to precision imbalance, and so what this has done is thrown it out. And we've got another problem today. What's causing a chicken to grow in 5 weeks for market? It's the growth hormones. Well, against the law to give growth hormones now, so they've just genetically modified the chicken to produce more estrogen so it grows quicker. And if the human eats that chicken, what happens to them? And if it's in the chicken, it's in the egg. There's more. And that is fabrics, chemicals. In the Industrial Revolution, basically, is where a lot of chemicals were produced. And glyphosate, which is the active component in Roundup, it kills the weeds by actually affecting their hormones. So when the human eats the plant that's actually been contaminated with Roundup, that's having an effect. But also in the Industrial Revolution, there were 3 fabrics that were created in a chemical laboratory: nylon, acrylic, polyester. Nylon, acrylic and polyester are chemical fabrics. And when they touch the skin and the pores in the skin take them in, little by little that is also disrupting the hormones, causing this rise in estrogen. It's everywhere, it's everywhere. One lady said to me, "Barbara, I've just looked at all my clothes and I'm going to have to throw them all out." Well, the good news is there are some fabrics that we know natural fabrics are linen and cotton and wool, and I'm sure in Idaho you wear a lot of wool, am I right? You should. I've got woolen leggings on, I've got woolen skirt, I've got a woolen top, and you can get beautiful, soft, thin wools. You've got Smart Wool. That's an American brand. I think this is a Smart Wool. And it's so soft I can wear it next to my skin, and then that's a bit prickly, but I don't mind because it's not touching my skin. So on the neck of the sheep is the soft wool that they make the inner garments with, and then the back of the sheep's the prickly wool. Well, there you can make the coats out of that. And the beauty of wool, we were on our morning walk this morning and I had an alpaca top on, and then I had a wool under that and wool under that and wool under that. And it was lightly raining, and my woolen hat. And you know, when I went back inside, all the light rain does is sit on the outside, but I was warm inside and breathing. Someone has made a fortune out of polyester. And Jacqueline and I, we were in Airbnbs and different places. There's not a place we have stayed in that hasn't got polyester blankets. So you just touch them, it's that stuff. You want to feel something nice, you can come up and touch me. Not all at once. And when I was in Ireland, the only place you can buy wool is the tourist shops. I said, Irish, start supporting your local industry. And when I was in Scotland, I was signing a book, and a lady came up to me and she said, "I'm a shepherdess." She said, "We're burning our wool." She said, "We're using wool for compost on our trees." Yeah. This has crept up on us without even realising. We've got to go back to supporting our local industry. Be careful where your dollar goes. I'm very careful where my dollar goes. So starting to be aware of our exposure to chemicals, because you will notice that after the Industrial Revolution and humanity was exposed now to so many more chemicals, you look at that's when the rise in cancers. So it's not just hormones. Yes, it's the synthetic hormones. And I'm pretty sure it's Thursday night. Am I right, Jack? Where's Jack? Where's my right hand lady? Thursday we look at hormones, where I'll look in detail about how this disruption takes place and how to restore it. But that wild yam cream with diosgenin, you can buy a wild yam cream that just has the diosgenin in it. And that when that's applied to the skin, the fat cells take it up, and what it does little by little by little, it boosts progesterone. And when you boost that mother hormone, whether it be male with prostate, whether it be female with breast cancer or any type of endocrine cancer, it causes it restores the balance, which is actually what we want. So they're important parts of cancers like the breast cancer. But also what you've got is poultices. And so I had a lady attend our program, and she said to me, 20 years ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. She said, I'm lying in the hospital and they were offering me to be poisoned, burnt and cut. I mean, chemo, radio and operation. Do you know my husband, he suggests that in 20 years we're going to look back and say we're in the dark ages with cancer treatments. So she was lying in hospital. She didn't like the sound of what they wanted to do to her. And a delivery boy came in and she said, can I get a lift out with you? She rang a friend who had a beach house. It was winter, so no one was really staying in the beach house. She said she walked up and down the beach every day. She dived in the beach quickly. And she'd heard about castor oil. Castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And she said, I wore this castor oil compress on my breast 24/7. I've had some people say, is that safe? Well, does anyone say that about the chemicals that they put in? So what she did was she made that's a little bit small. We'll do it more to size. So it's a very simple way to make the compress and depending on the size, and you put that much castor oil on. And what it'll do, it'll sit up like a big bubble because it is so thick. One lady said, I think I bought the wrong castor oil, it's so sticky. I said, yeah, that's what it is. It's just very, very sticky. And if you overdo it, it'll drip everywhere, and you don't want that. It's horrible stuff in that respect. And then as it soaks through, it'll take about 15 minutes. It now takes up that much of the compress. And then when it goes on your hot body, which warms the oil, it takes up more. And that's the best way to make it. And what you also need is several layers, because the thicker your compress, the more castor oil it can hold, and then more castor oil going into you. And then it's just covered by a little plastic strip. So the little plastic strip might be on the back like that. And what the plastic does is it insulates it and it stops it soiling the clothes. And she just bought a sports bra and she just devoted it to that. And she said if she was careful with it, she really didn't get it dripping everywhere. But castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And it'll penetrate through and break up unnatural formations. It'll even break up a bone spur. Not overnight, of course. If the bone spur's been there 3 years, it might take 3 months. If it's been there 3 months, it might take 3 weeks. So much depends on how long it has been there. So if it'll break up a bone spur, it'll certainly break up any unnatural formations. So if there's growths on the breast, put it on the breast. If it growth anywhere in the body, apply that castor oil compress. So if it's cancer is in the colon, then apply it to the abdominal area. If it's in the kidneys, apply it there. So wherever it is. What about the head? Well, you can certainly apply it there. It won't be hard to, usually a scan will show you exactly where it is. Yes, the castor oil will even penetrate through bone. So that's the beauty of the castor oil. So as you can see, as I'm coming into the area of cancer, there are specifics for different types of cancers. I have many books at home that were written by professors, scientists, doctors, specialists, GPs, nutritionists, naturopaths that have conquered cancer. And you will find that there are many different things that people say, and it can be very confusing. So as I read all of these accounts, I came to 3 common denominators. And that's what I want to share with you now, those 3 common denominators. But before I do, I just want to finish the story of the lady who said she had breast cancer 20 years ago. Remember? Got out with the delivery boy, went to the friend's house that had the beach house. She walked up and down the beach every day. She went to organic food. She stayed on a plant-based, very simple diet, applied the castor oil every day. And she said as she walked every day, she'd ask God to bring to her mind anybody that she needed to forgive. If she had any area in her life, and that is an important part of healing, is the emotional part. Anyway, she said that lump started to go down little by little. She said within 6 months there was no trace of the lump. So remember, she came to us 20 years later. She said, I had breast cancer 20 years ago. Now I want to tell you one other story before I go into defining these things. And when I was in Los Angeles last November, I was speaking at a conference, and there was a lady there who was also speaking, and she had her book. She gave me her book. She'd conquered breast cancer. She was about 48, and I think she had the breast cancer when she was about 43. And she did just what the only thing she knew and didn't even question. They said, quickly, we can start chemotherapy immediately. And they said, with chemotherapy, it'll shrink the cancer, then we can maybe do a mastectomy. So she started the chemotherapy tablet by mouth. And she said that she started to get diarrhea quite badly, and she was constantly nauseous, and she was a dark-skinned lady. She had dreadlocks, and she said after 2 months she cried because her dreadlocks were just falling out. And she said after 2 months she got to the point where she was having diarrhea and vomiting 37 times a day. And she got so thin, she was just constantly nauseous, that they had to put a drip in her to give her some nourishment, but they couldn't find a vein, and her arms just got so totally bruised. And then she found she couldn't walk because she had peripheral neuropathy, another side effect of the chemotherapy. She said it felt like she was walking on razor blades. And every day the tablet would come and she would take it. After 3 months of this, she had a scan and the cancer had not shrunk at all. And she kept taking the tablet. That's why I love that verse in Psalm 146, verse 3. It says, put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns unto his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish. In other words, he's just a man. And it's just an opinion, and sometimes they get it wrong. That's why the Bible says, put not your trust there. So what do? Well, verse 5 tells you, it says, happy is he that has the God of Jacob, has his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God, that made heaven, earth, sea, and all that in them is, that keeps truth forever. This lady kept taking the tablet. The incredible trust. She got to the point where she couldn't walk. She had to be in a wheelchair. And then a friend visited. And the friend said to her, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I did. I chose not to do this. She said, I've conquered my cancer. I use natural remedies. And she left. And this lady started to think, so she started to Google. And she found people that had conquered their cancer. And she didn't want to go up on mad tangents, and so she found organic food was a common denominator. She found that juicing was another common denominator, and black seed oil, so a few people mentioned that. So she asked her husband to take her to the health food shop because she was in a wheelchair, and she started to get organic food. She started to do this, and then she made a very difficult decision. She stopped the tablet. But she didn't tell anyone because she said she knew they'd get angry with her. You know, it's your God-given right to do what you do to your body. But when you're in such a weakened state, you need the support of the ones you love. And she didn't even tell her husband because she knew he'd get angry, because he had total trust in the system. She'd hide the tablet. And she took the organic food, she started juicing, and she knew she had to start walking. So she got a physiotherapist. The first day she could only walk one step and it just was too painful. She said after a couple of weeks, her hair stopped falling out and started to grow. The nausea stopped. She was able to start eating. The diarrhea stopped. The vomiting stopped. And after 3 months, slowly she's getting better. She could walk 4 steps, and then a few days later 6 steps, even though it was excruciatingly painful. After 3 months she had a scan and the cancer was shrinking. And everyone was very happy. They said the treatment's working. But she still didn't tell anyone. She just wanted to be sure. After 6 months, the cancers had shrunk right down. She was starting to walk, for a few minutes at a time. And she asked her husband if they could go out. And she told him. She said, I haven't taken the chemotherapy for 6 months. She said, I'm so sorry I didn't tell you, but I knew you loved me so much. You wanted to go with the only treatment that you knew. And when I'm reading this book, I have to tell you, I felt anger. And I thought, I'm not reading of a concentration camp here. I'm reading about people in chemotherapy clinics. I do acknowledge, and I had a guest that had a tumour so big it had blocked her colon. She had the chemotherapy and the radiotherapy, which shrunk it, so her colon could move again. Then she came to Misty Mountain, and she went through what I'm going to show you here. I certainly do acknowledge that. And that's why I think we have to continually listen to our bodies and know our bodies, because our bodies will tell us if things aren't working well. Simple as the colon. If we eat 3 meals a day, guess how many times we should be evacuating? 3. And if we're not, that, something can be happening in there, not immediately. The body is incredible how it doesn't strike us down straight away. So what are these 3 common denominators? I'm going to define them by listing what cancer hates. Now, if you know what cancer hates, that's exactly what we want to do to the body. We want to create in the body an environment where it's impossible for cancer to survive. Cancer hates low glucose. Why is that? Because cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. We're going to go to the cell, and I'm going to show you what happens in the cell. The glucose goes in. Now this week we're going to go inside the cell quite a bit, because that's what we are. We're just a bunch of cells, and 100 trillion cells in the body, and 75 trillion are, as I'm drawing here, 25 trillion are the red blood cells, and the red blood cells are the carriers to what I call the CBD, the inside, the central business district of the human body, the inside workings of the cell. It's fascinating what's going inside that cell. When you understand what's going on inside the cell, when you understand how the cell works, then you understand the conditions to give the cell for healing. So the glucose goes in, and it goes through a 20-step pathway. And this 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. Isn't that why we eat? To give us energy. Now, the end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into what's often called the powerhouse of the cell, because this 8-step pathway delivers to us 36 units of energy. Whoa! How come a 20-step pathway only gives us 2 units of energy, and how come an 8-step pathway gives us 36? It's oxygen. This pathway here, no oxygen. And this pathway here is a very fast pathway. It consumes huge amounts of glucose and doesn't use oxygen. Cancer hates oxygen. The fact is, cancer cannot live in the presence of oxygen. cancer cell runs up here. No oxygen, huge amounts of glucose. Doesn't every cell in the body use glucose? Yes, it does. But this pathway, it can wait from the glucose from the carrot and the lentil and the almond. But this pathway here, it loves and is sustained by a high glucose diet. It's like a lady, and she's happy for me to share her story. Her name's Elizabeth Cott. And she came to us, I think she was late 60s when she came to us, and she had 3 big tumours in her abdomen, and the doctor said, you got to do chemo immediately. She didn't like the look of chemo. She didn't like the look of the side effects. Do you know what chemotherapy is? Cytotoxic. Do you know what that means? Poison to the cell. And the reason why chemotherapy works, and there are some people that certainly have recovered, there are some people that have had chemo and they've recovered, there's no doubt about that. Because this glycolytic pathway is consuming 15 times the glucose of any other cell, when chemo goes in, it consumes 15 times the chemo. That's how it works. But I was reading the confessions of a chemotherapy sales rep. And he said he was at a conference, they were explaining the chemo, and the speaker said, it's a gamble. We're just hoping more cancer cells die than good cells. He was shocked. But what shocked him more was that no one else in the room was shocked. So it's like playing Russian roulette. And the story I'm about to tell you has been told to me many, many times. Lady comes. She's got brain cancer and liver cancer. She said 2 years ago, I had a blood cancer, and I took chemo and radiotherapy, and after 3 months they said, you're totally cured. But she said, 4 years ago I had breast cancer. I did chemo, they did radiotherapy, I had a double mastectomy, and after 4 months they said, you're totally cured. And then 2 years later, she had blood cancer. Chemo, radiotherapy, 3 months, you're cured. And now she's got liver cancer and brain cancer. Well, was she cured? And one lady who came to our retreat was when I was home in January. She said at 26 I had breast cancer. She said I had chemotherapy and radiotherapy and mastectomy. She said 5 years after that I had a party because, they said she'd been cancer-free for 5 years. She said 2 weeks later she had pain in her hips. She's got cancer in her hips now. Was she cured? And I have heard that so many times. It appears like it has done it, but comes back. Because if you don't turn the tap off, if you don't find the cause, you will never have a cure. A lady said to me, Barbara, have you heard the latest research in America? These doctors are discovering that cancer thrives with high sugar and no oxygen. I said, well, I'm so glad that they're studying that, but did you know that in 1946, Professor Otto Warburg got a Nobel Prize for that discovery? 1946. We're 2025. See, what happened? Well, the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds came in. And they funded the research to go to chemoradiotherapy. Cancer hates an alkaline environment. You see, cancer thrives in an acid environment. So let me go back to Elizabeth Cott. She didn't like the sound of chemo. She didn't like the sound of the side effects. And a friend gave her a DVD of mine, because this was probably 10 years ago now, on cancer. So she booked into Misty Mountain Health Retreat. And she went through the treatments that I'm going to show you that we did there. She went home and she was feeling great. And after 3 months, she went back to the doctor. And he said, keep doing what you're doing and I'll see you in 6 months. Now, what did he say 3 months before? You're going to have chemo immediately. This is fast growing. You see, all her cancer markers had gone down. Her inflammatory markers had gone down. And so he did not pressure her to do anything at all, but to keep doing what she's doing. She ended up going back after 1 year after her initial diagnosis, and the doctor said, I'm a bit puzzled, but one of your tumours has disappeared. I think it was something like 8 months later, another tumour had disappeared. When she goes to see the doctor now, the specialist, the oncologist are there, they just look at her. They can't understand what is happening. She said, I'm in my late 70s now, and she said, I have never felt better. And when I was being attacked in Australia, they said, Elizabeth Cotty's a fictitious woman. She said, give them my phone number. I said to her a few weeks later, have they rung you? She said, no. No, they haven't. Maybe they don't want the truth. I don't know. See, my husband has a political party in Australia. It's called HEART, Health, Environment, Accountability, Rights and Transparency, campaigning for free choice for Australians. And we actually think that's why they attacked me, to get at him. He said he wasn't, that came in from sideways there. But when you understand the inside workings of the cell and where the cancer runs, then what we aim to do is create an environment in the body where cancer cannot survive. So no matter what type of cancer it is, this is where we work at. So I think I'm learning fast. And so what we aim to do is to turn off the tap. And if you don't turn off the tap, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. What I always do, and I think this is a very simple formula, is you always look at the person's history, because the history does give you some indications of why this might be happening. And if someone has say breast cancer, I always ask, were you ever on the pill? Now, not every woman that's been on the pill has breast cancer, but it's surprising the amount of women that are on the pill and their daughters in their late 20s are getting breast cancer. But also I was reading the report of a breast surgeon, and he said it's alarming the amount of young women who are getting breast cancer in the breast where they put their mobile phone in the bra. It's called the silent killer, is that exposure to electromagnetic field. So that is another aspect, and sometimes it can be a few threads. Sometimes her mother was on the pill. So if a woman's on the pill for 5, 6, 7 years before she gives birth to her children, then her children can be born with a hormonal imbalance. But that woman can give birth to 5 children, and some will have a major imbalance, some don't even appear to have an imbalance. It's just, in fact, I think we all know the genetics that comes through. But you know what they're saying today about genetics? You can only apply 5% to genetics. Well, if genetics were the cause, that would take away our free choice. Only 5% to genetics. The fact is, genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And that is an area of interesting study. It's called epigenetics, the effect of lifestyle on our genes, showing that we can switch the genes on or off by our lifestyle, even actually by our thoughts. That, it's like one lady, she said, when her doctor said to her, you've got 6 months to live, she said, you're not God. She said, only God knows how long I've got to live. And if anyone here has been told that, please reject it immediately. Because the fact is, the body is very obedient to the mind. And how many people are told that, and to the very day they do. So that is another aspect, is what's happening in the mind. So the first thing to do is to starve the cancer. And when you realise what the cancer loves, high sugar. So what we suggest when someone is coming to us wanting to conquer cancer, no sweet at all for 6 weeks. It's not as actually severe, it is more severe and strict than the cancer-conquering diet. And there is a reason for that. And there are several authors today, and Professor Constantini, he's head of the World Health Organization Department of Mycology. And the Department of Mycology is the study of fungus. And he found a strong link between fungus and cancer. And I find in some cases there's a strong link, and in some cases there's not a strong link. And in some cases I can see that it's a major hormonal imbalance that's causing the breast cancer, but in other cases it's not so. That's why you're the doctor, because if there's anything I've learnt in my many years on planet Earth, it's never to be absolute. There's so many factors that come into play. It's like the lady that had inflammatory breast cancer that came to us, and her breast was very large and inflamed. It was like a boulder on her chest. And she came at a very advanced stage, and it had developed after she found out that her 17-year-old daughter had been pack raped. So there was a very strong emotional aspect there. So, and yet another woman can go through that but not quite react in that way. That's why we are all so very different. Another reason why we should be our own doctor. We had another lady that came with her breast like a rock. She was only 35. And it really surprised me, because she'd written a book on the acid-alkaline balance in the body, so she knew health. She was a doctor of chiropractic from Canada. And when she walked out of the room, I was left with her husband, and I said, how did it get to that? He said, I don't know. She'd sort of, a little lump arise, and she just thought it wouldn't go anywhere, and she didn't do anything, and it just got... In fact, it was to the point now that no one could, not even medicine can do anything. They could not even do a mastectomy because it had grown into the bones of her chest. And she was just living on heavy painkillers. There was not much we could do at all because she couldn't lie. It was very, very sad. And it was the next program, a friend of hers came and did the program. And she said, let me tell you a little bit of background. She used to do body sculpting, which is like bodybuilding, but women. And she showed me photos on the internet of her, in a G-string, standing like this, and the muscles and the... She said they don't drink for 3 days before they show. And when they don't drink for 3 days, it makes all the muscles and the arteries stand out or something. And also when a woman is heavily training like that, she stops menstruating. It's not uncommon with women athletes. And what happens then is progesterone levels drop and the estrogen levels rise. So I started to link the things coming together. Her mother had been on the pill before she gave birth to her. She'd been training intensely and she hadn't had a period for a year, so that caused estrogen levels to rise. And then the total dehydration, you see that again? Factors coming in. It's quite possible if she'd immediately started to work with castor oil on that, if she'd balanced the hormones with the yam cream, it's quite possible that she could have prevented it going there. But I tell you those stories because every person's story is a little bit different and there are different factors coming together. So when I say starve, definitely in endocrine it means balance the hormones. That's a very important part whenever there's endocrine cancer. But what also starving is checking the house for any mould, because mould is definitely a factor, sometimes a large factor, sometimes a minor factor. I have another book in my library at home, and by the way, Professor Constantini, who was former head of the World Health Organization Department of Mycology, the study of fungus, in his books he quotes 30,000 research papers showing the link between cancer and fungus. And I have another book in my library by an Italian oncologist named Dr. Tullio Simoncini. Now, he was an Italian oncologist that was getting 90% success rate with cancer. He was injecting sodium bicarbonate straight into the cancer. So this is the other factor, is alkalis. And when we go on our journey through the gut tomorrow night, you will see that the lining of the stomach has sodium bicarbonate to neutralise stomach acid if it tries to get through the stomach lining. And when you get down to the pancreas, it releases sodium bicarbonate to neutralise the acid coming out of the stomach. It's a naturally occurring substance, is sodium bicarbonate. And our grandmothers and great-grandmothers used sodium bicarbonate to clean the bathroom, to kill mould in the bathroom, because fungus and mould cannot survive in an alkaline environment. So what Dr. Tullio Simoncini was doing, he was injecting via a portacath sodium bicarbonate straight into the cancer, and he said the cancer would just shrink because it gives a wave of alkalinity to the cancer. And he was probably 12 years ago, he had a little clip on YouTube where he'd put a camera down into a lung and showed the cancer. It was like a white growth. And then via a portacath, he injected sodium bicarbonate and you could see the cancer shrinking up. So what's happened to him? Well, unfortunately, he injected sodium bicarbonate into someone and apparently they died. I don't know whether they died then or they died the next day. There's no documentation of it, and we don't know whether the person was about to die anyway. My husband said if only he'd injected him with chemotherapy. Because you know what they did? They put him in jail and put him on a charge of manslaughter and took all his qualifications away. That wouldn't have happened if he'd injected with chemotherapy. So unfortunately, that often happens to people who are onto something good. The pharmaceutical company can't make money out of sodium bicarbonate. But he was getting incredible results, and he said that in every case of cancer that came to him, because he's an oncologist, he found Candida albicans. So the title of his book is Cancer is a Fungus. Now, one of the accusations against me in Australia is that I quote a disgraced oncologist, Tullio Simoncini. He is not disgraced in my eyes. He was getting those results. But unfortunately, someone died. But we've seen it at our place. We've had people come and you sort of think, oh dear, it looks like they're going to die tomorrow. You know, it's the very last stage when they come to us. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't look to natural ways until they've just about been through the mill, unfortunately. So mould is definitely a factor in the majority of cases. May not be in every case. With Elizabeth Cott, she's a Polish lady, the lady that had the 3 tumours. Her house was as clean as a pin. There was definitely mould there, but she used to use a lot of chemicals. She said, I was guilty of keeping my house so spotlessly clean, it was dangerous in my house. There's so many chemicals. And she said, and I also discovered another factor. She said, I go to a Polish church and I'm the dessert maker. And she said, we Polish love our desserts. And she said, I used to make a meringue cake. We call it a pavlova. They beat egg whites and sugar and bake it. She said, I used to make one this big and I would put 16 cups of white sugar in that. Think of that next time someone offers you a slice. Whew. She said, and you see, this lady she's a vegetarian, she never drank, never smoked, and people say, why would she get these tumours? But can you see her exposure to the chemicals and also the high sugar diet that she said, I believe I was just feeding those cancers. And that's why, number one, you stop. You stop anything that could be contributing to it, and the sugars. And this also includes even the refined carbohydrates. And tomorrow we're going to be looking at diabetes, I think is our second lecture, and I'll be going through the carbohydrates and showing you how the refined carbohydrates, they can be creating just as much sugar as even refined sugar. And she said that, she used to make a lot of desserts and they only ever ate the whites, the white breads, the white pastas. Number 2, and that is the kill. And in our last class, we looked at fungus. We looked at how it has a similar way that you can kill it. And when you realise that cancer and fungus are closely related, and in some cases it plays a large part, in some cases, like Elizabeth clot, not a large part. So there are herbs that will kill, but they won't kill you. But the way to do this is to alternate. Now, as I showed you in our last lecture, our microorganisms have the ability to adapt and adjust. And that is why just coming in and blasting bacteria with antibiotics really isn't the answer. You have to find out why they're there in the first place and create an environment in the body where it can't survive, and at the same time taking the herbs to knock it back. But you'll notice how I showed you that our microorganisms have the ability to adapt and adjust. So if you keep throwing garlic at it, it'll eventually adapt and adjust to it. So what you do is you do a different one every week or every 2 weeks. So it might be garlic 3 times a day for a week or 2 weeks. And then just as the microorganisms are starting to get used to that, you do something else. You might do olive leaf extract 3 times a day for 2 weeks. And then grapefruit seed extract. Grapefruit seed extract's very strong. It's about 5 drops in a little bit of water, 3 times a day. And then another one is portiaco. And portiaco is a South American herb that has strong antifungal properties. And another one is oregano oil. You call it oregano. Is that right? Now, I had a sore throat about 3 weeks ago, so I took oregano oil. Oh, I tell you, it's bad. Real bad. And I was just taking 1 drop. So if you take it as part of your program, you start with 1 drop in just a little bit of water. And then you might have a nice carrot, celery and apple juice to follow that. And that is a juice that is highly alkalizing too, is the carrot, celery and apple juice. But back with the oregano oil, some people have found they can build up to even 3 drops 3 times a day. You just do what you can handle.
What was in between the carrot and the apple juice?
So I'll go back to that now. I'll go back to the juice and show you the juice. So we're going to look at a whole lot of ways you can alkalize, and juices have been used very successfully in the treatment of cancer because the juices are nutrient-packed. And the body needs nutrients to heal. And the one that we use is 80% carrot. This is called the vegetarian's milk because you could just about subsist on this juice. In fact, I've met 2 women who gave it to their babies instead of milk. Their babies had major allergies. 10% apple and 10% celery. Now, some people have commented to me that isn't that a lot of sugar when you realise that you're trying to get the sugars down? Because they're so high in minerals that it doesn't get the sugar levels up. I don't suggest that you have 10 of those a day, but, 3 a day. What we usually do at our retreat, when people come to Misty Mountain, they usually come in on Sunday, and Monday and Tuesday are juicing days. And we serve a juice every 2 hours, and it's mostly carrot, celery and apple. Sometimes we'll variate a bit and put some cucumber in. Sometimes we'll put a bit of beet in. Sometimes we'll put some greens in. But that's the main one. But that is a very alkalizing juice. And on Friday we're going to be looking at inflammation, and that certainly is a great additive to conquer inflammation. Green drinks is another big alkalizer. So with green drinks, what we do at Misty Mountain, because we've got a big garden and we've got a lot of land, is we'll gather wild greens, say 4 cups of wild greens, 4 cups of water, blend them together. We always make 1 of the cups of greens mint, so it tastes a bit better. And we blend it and strain it and pour it into bottles. So it's like drinking grass. It's just liquid green. So here is the molecular structure of plant blood, which basically is chlorophyll. And here is the molecular structure of human blood. Looks almost identical. I don't know why the pen decided to do that, but it did. So there's plant and there's human. There is one difference. And the difference with the human blood is the middle molecule is iron, and with the plant blood, the middle molecule is magnesium. And so these green drinks have a cleansing effect in the tissues and also in the blood, and are blood boosters. And they're highly alkalizing because the green vegetables are high in the alkaline minerals, which are magnesium, calcium, potassium, and sodium and iron. They're the alkaline minerals. Now, if you don't have greens like we have, the person can buy barley green or green barley, or you can buy chlorophyll and maybe have that 3 times a day. So what you're aiming to do is alkalize from the inside. There's more ways you can alkalize. Dr. Tullio Simongini was injecting sodium bicarbonate into the cancer of his patients. I'm not a doctor. I don't put portacaths in, but we discovered a treatment that was very effective. And this is not a cancer cure, because the body only is the one that can cure cancer. But what it is, it's part of a regime of giving the body so it's impossible for cancer to survive, and they're sodium bicarbonate wraps. Can you drink sodium bicarbonate? The only time that I would advise that would be to gargle it if you had cancer in the throat, because sodium bicarbonate only alkalizes what it touches. And if someone had stomach cancer, they could drink it first thing in the morning and maybe last thing at night, because the only part of the stomach that is acid, the only part of the body that's acid is the stomach. And the stomach should be acid because it's acid that breaks the food down. But the acid's only released when you see, smell, think, look food. So when you wake up in the morning, it's not acid. The acid's just released when the food comes. And so if there is stomach cancer, then the sodium bicarbonate can be drunk first thing in the morning or maybe last thing at night. Remember, sodium bicarbonate only alkalizes what it touches. How would you make it up? Usually a teaspoon to a cup of water. But also, if someone has colon cancer, they could put the sodium bicarbonate mix into an enema, and they could have an enema with it. But what we were doing, and a Canadian doctor gave me this recipe, was sodium bicarbonate wraps, where we get 2 kilos of sodium bicarbonate, 5 litres of hot water and lemon juice of a lemon, and we dip towels in, rinse it out, and one part of the body, then cover it with wool, and then another towel on the leg, and then another one on the arm. It's quite a involved treatment, and then wrap the whole body in a blanket. So all surface areas from the neck down are covered with the very hot sodium bicarbonate infused towels, which of course opens the pores of the skin and it comes into the tissues. Green drinks and this carrot, celery and apple juice, they alkalize the tissues internally. Sodium bicarbonate only alkalizes what it touches, but the beauty of the wraps is that it's been taken in through the pores. Also, another treatment that alkalizes is hyperbaric chambers. Now, the hyperbaric chambers were developed for divers with bends. You see, the air we're breathing in is 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. So the divers come up so equipped from the depths that they can't breathe out all the nitrogen, so it comes into bubbles in their tissues, well, muscles, joints. And what they found was when they put them in the hyperbaric chamber, the hyperbaric chamber works on Henry's law, and Henry's law states that more gas goes into a liquid under pressure. And the gas, of course, is oxygen, pure oxygen being pumped in, and the liquid is the blood, because the blood is the carrier of oxygen. And so the hyperbaric chamber just ups the oxygen content in the body and so in the cell. And cancer cannot live in the presence of oxygen. There is a retreat in Eden, it's called Eden Valley in Colorado, and they have several hyperbaric chambers. And another treatment they do is the fever bath, which has been used for many years. That's another one of upping the temperature of the body to literally burn out harmful pathogens in the body. So when someone comes to our retreat in Australia, this basically is what we do. We give them a diet that's no fruit for 6 weeks, lots of vegetables, legumes, because legumes are medium to low in carbohydrates, a little grain, not a lot, nuts and seeds, and there are so many different legumes and so many different vegetables, you can have quite a nice variety. And the herbs, alternating them every couple of weeks, and the juices and the green drinks, and when they're at Misty, the hyperbaric and the sodium bicarb wraps. And this basically is what Elizabeth Cott did. And she found that little by little her cancers went. And we had another man attend our program with prostate cancer. And he didn't really want to be at our retreat, but his wife and his daughter were really keen, but he did not like what medicine was offering to him. So he went along with it. And when he came, it was very interesting because he was mid-50s, his wife was early 50s, his daughter was 30. And everything I was talking about, this is about 5 years ago, his daughter and his wife were, yes, he'll do it, yes. And he was, suppose, but he was sort of there a bit reluctantly, but he knew he had to do something and he didn't want to do what medicine offered. And it was funny, we'd offer him the green drinks and he'd look at it, and his daughter and his wife are just about pouring it down his throat, but he just did whatever they told him. And they went home, and before he went home, we laid out the program. It was in my book, Self-Heal by Design. It's called the Cancer Conquering Diet. So I give illustrations of what to eat. And then after 6 weeks on that, there's the antifungal diet, stage 1. So that's usually 2 months on that. And that person can start having some grapefruit, Granny Smith apples, and maybe a little bit more carbohydrates. And then after 2 months of that, they go to the antifungal stage 2 diet. And that's the maintenance diet. That's the diet the person stays on until they get the all clear. And that's a little bit more fruit, maybe some berries now, which aren't really high sweet. And you have a wonderful bread in America. It's called Simple Needs. And that Simple Needs is a gluten-free, and it has low carbohydrate, great protein bread. They'll even ship to your house, the Simple Needs breads. It's all organic. It's great. And so so this guy with prostate cancer, what we also did was put him on the wild yam cream to balance the hormones. He also took some herbs for the prostate, saw palmetto. In my book, Sustain Me, I have a chapter called Male Matters. So it's about male matters, where I talk about the prostate and list the herbs in there. So we heard from him 3 months later. He said, I've just had a test and I have no cancer. Now he's interested. And one of the big contributing factors with his cancer was he was a strawberry farmer. So a lot of chemicals were being used there. And I tell you all these stories to show you that almost no two are exactly the same. But what is the same is that we all live in a body that's got an inbuilt ability to heal itself, and it will when we give it the right condition. We had one man come and he'd just had 16 fine needle biopsies on the prostate. I said, is there anything left? The prostate's only about as big as a walnut. 16 fine needle. Can you imagine how damaging that is to the prostate? Personally, I would never have a biopsy, because a biopsy is damaging the tissues. And when those tissues are damaged, that's when cancer can increase. I don't tell anyone what to do, I just tell people what I would do. Because it's our God-given right to choose what we do to our bodies. And my aim is to give you information so you are better prepared to make decisions on what actually you want to do to your body. Because the fact is, if you've just been diagnosed with cancer and you're being pushed in a certain way, you have got time to think. And when God said in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, I have not given you the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind. You know what a sound mind does? They say to the doctor, thank you so much for your advice. So, I'm going to seriously consider this. And as you go out, you might say, don't call me, I'll call you. Because it's your right. It's your right to do what you do to your body. And I also know that it can be difficult when loved ones, family and friends pressure, because they love you. They don't want to lose you. And that's why I really believe that their eyes could be opened if they would hear these basic principles. But the good news is we've seen many people conquer cancer. And people say to me, well, how do you know? I say, well, you don't know. God only knows. Much depends on how advanced it is, depends on how damaged already the body is, depends on how diligent the person is to do what you've got to do to get the results. And you might have heard the poem, Choose Your Heart. Marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. Keeping fit is hard, being obese is hard, choose your hard. Saving your every cent is hard, being in debt is hard, choose your hard. And that is our God-given right to choose what we do to our body. Some might say, wow, that's a lot of work. Do you know, the people that have done this and the people who have experienced the results, they say, no, it wasn't hard at all because of the results that I got. So it's important to listen to your body. It's important to follow it. It's important to do what you feel it's your God-given right to do. As we close, I'd like to say a word of prayer and bid you good night. Father, thank you so much for your goodness and your mercy, this incredible body you've given us, and the simple, natural treatments that we can apply to get the most out of our body. Thank you for bringing us, and I pray your heavenly hand will be on our travel, and I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night. Amen. Thank you.
Friends, I hope you enjoyed that, but I'd like to ask you to remain seated for just a moment. I know many of you, now that the program is over, would like to get home, but most of us want to as well. And we just want to make sure that it's orderly, so we're going to have ushers coming up to the front. We'll usher you out. We just don't want anyone getting hurt. And another thing, there's several things I need your attention for. When you come tomorrow night, or if you invite someone, we want to be respectful to the coffee shop owner across the street. Please do not park in the paved parking in their parking lot because they're operating a business. The field across the street might be a little muddy and wet, but you're welcome to park over there if the parking lot here at the church is full. So the ushers will be starting to usher you out. We do have a question and answer card for tomorrow night. They're in the foyer there. There's also a survey sheet. Please fill that out when it's convenient. And I want to mention that there are some young people with baskets. The program, we've invited Barbara to be a blessing to our community. It's completely free. But sometimes people ask me, is there any way I can make a donation? Again, you're not obligated to, but if someone wants to, there'll be some young people with a basket or something. You can make a donation if you'd like to, and that would be used for the expenses of having this Barbara here. So may God bless you and keep you. Tomorrow, she will have question and answer time. We start at 4. We might open the doors a little bit earlier because I know some of you were out in the rain or it was cold. But if you want to sit in the sanctuary, we had over 700 people here tonight, and many were full downstairs. So if you want to sit in the sanctuary, I would suggest that you would be here a little early by 4 o'clock, okay? God bless you and have a good evening. The ushers will usher you out. So you can exit here in the front. If you're in the front row, you're welcome to go out here. Watch your step. It's still freezing outside. It could be icy and muddy. And then we can exit out the back.